Code cleaner's diary because for reasons that I'm not quite sure of, I oftentimes end up cleaning a lot of code. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this, about the things that I hate most about that. And there is going to be this admission of guilt. I really like cleanly formatted code, and things like that really, really grind my gears. And it's not that this is allowed, it's more that I just end up finding these kinds of things, regardless of how they came to be. If it was someone typing them in, if it was an automated tool that reformatted something and was terrible at it, I don't care. Like, these things happen, they appear, and it's really grinding my gears having to talk about white space. So really, my problem is literally white space. Like white space, like it feels so insignificant to talk about this. I love to talk about white space to designers, but I hate to talk about white space with engineers. And Python is a language of people that love white space. I mean, they made it significant, so I mean, there's got to be something here. So where I have to sort of still talk about white space. And Python, like, what really worries me when I look at Python code, Python really allows us to put white space everywhere. Like, there is white space left and right. You can almost, like, in almost any place, the most uncomfortable places in Python code you can find, you can stick white space in there. I'm quite sure. And this is something for me. This is something for me that is one of the things that I worry most when I'm writing software is growing maintenance nightmares. Build software that is going to be a nightmare to maintain. It's going where I worry about code reviews where my focus should be on the actual algorithmic implementation, the choice of names, really what the person did content-wise, but maybe they didn't know the code style, maybe they love another one. So I have to start discussing formatting. I really, really worry about the distraction that different formatting styles give you. And I really worry about the time that people spend learning obscure formatting styles. Like, oh, this project likes it like that project likes it like this. Why do I have that? Why do I need that? And I really, really want to create. As a software engineer, my feeling is that I want to create things, not discuss how they are neatly arranged. I want to create interesting architecture, or like the absence of it, but I don't want to think about where to put another white space. And Pavel and Mariano yesterday really covered the other parts that are there to code style in Python. Pythonic idioms, working for a nice architecture, working towards a nice structure, getting documentation right, and naming. But underneath all of this, for me, are a lot of these mechanical corrections that are basically formatting and normalization of code. And this talk is going to be largely about this exact mechanical part, because it grinds my gears that it's mechanical, but we still discuss it, and there's still way too much discussion around it. People tell me, no, we don't have this discussion. No, I don't have this in my team. But then I look at GitHub, and this is actually pulled from the pull request comments. And is the percentage of comments that in any way mention formatting, PEP8, blank lines, terms that are really sort of part of this whole formatting deal. And there is an obvious bias, there is an obvious problem in those numbers, because something that has become really, really popular lately is bots that tell me that I'm doing something wrong, which I find insulting almost, because now a machine, I spent machine cycles on telling me that something is wrong, and potentially it could even fix it, but what does it do? It just tells me, oh, human, you do something. I'm not sure. Like, I feel that a machine shouldn't just tell me to do something. The machine should tell me either how to fix it or fix it. I don't see why I should really worry about this. I mean, sometimes, yes, line length is a bit of a complicated issue, but maybe there's still something that the machine could have done for me. I want to ask you guys. So there is sort of this formatting spectrum, I think. There's one where like people are very pedantic about like what their code looks like, formatting-wise, really. And then there's this other sort of crowd that says, I don't care, as long as it works. Like, my code works, what do you want? So maybe a show of hands real quick in the room. Who's more on the pedantic side? Oh, I love it. I love it. You guys are my crowd. Who's more on the I don't care side? Like, oh, maybe I'll get you guys later. So here's me. When I'm writing code, I actually don't care that much. But when I'm reviewing code, I'm an asshole. And I get really pedantic, and I think about, is this too clever? Even when I review things, also in terms of like when I'm thinking about idioms, is this too clever to do? Is it not too clever to do? Is there going to be an ex-murderer coming after me because they are going to maintain my code in 10 years? So why is formatting still an issue, like really an issue in Python? And I think this largely boils down to that Python really, really loves to sprinkle white space everywhere and is still valid. And that's cool, right? Being able to sprinkle white space everywhere makes the language attractive. It makes it approachable. You can start writing Python, you can add, and the compiler or the interpreter is actually not going to barf at you for, oh, yes, you're missing a space here, or there should be another space there. Python sort of agrees that white space is sort of insignificant in many places, but then it's significant in others. And then we have this whole back and forth between, but it wasn't significant there, but now it's significant here. Like we're having a hubris in the message that we're bringing to people that start with Python here, right? Like, oh yeah, I mean, you have to indent properly, and it has to be spaces. Or tabs. Let's not even get into that holy war. But then we're also telling them, you know, you need to do it right. Here you can do whatever you want. Like, be my guest, play with it, and that feels wrong to me. In Python 3.6, we actually added more things to sprinkle around. We can now sprinkle 1,000 separators into numbers. So that's cool. So all my numbers are going to be looking great, and I'm wondering what interesting use people come up for this beyond just 1,000 separation. Maybe it's sort of like a snake kind of thing. I don't know. Like maybe there's something to it. I'm still thinking of good use beyond just what it was intended for. So this whole freedom is cool. The simplicity of it, easy for beginners, but basically on the other hand, this whole space of options that this gives us also needs some boiling down afterwards. And that is where style guides come in. This is why we have PEP8. If the Python interpreter was a really rigid system that would look for spaces in the right places and it would tell you to redo everything, we would not have this discussion. We would never have to have this discussion. But then again, it would also not be very much fun to work in this because you cannot just vomit out a piece of code and it will just work. So what this really boils down to, and this is what PEP8 really prescribes to, is readability, right? Formatting issues distract from content. And I'd like to think as formatting as the underpinning of good code style. Like you can write the most idiomatic Pythonic code that you can think of. If the formatting is terrible, people will call you out on that, regardless of use of the greatest of all the idioms. And this is actually something that that if you watch all the talks of people talking about PEP8, the first thing that they will do when they say, oh, I'm going to rewrite this in a Pythonic way, is they will also adjust the formatting. Because only then sort of the beauty of all of it will be really visible, and sort of this like you will actually see why it's so beautiful. Like, and yesterday night we were talking about this over a beer, and someone was telling me, well, I use terrible formatting as an indicator for that the code is also terrible. which probably is true because that person maybe doesn't have the muscle memory yet to write code in PEP 8. But maybe they do have the muscle memory, they just don't care. And this is sort of an interesting sort of, there is something that binds formatting and code style together, and we should be careful about just sort of judging code by its cover. I think that especially, and now if we're talking about also consistency, disruptions in style really distract the reader. It's something that will distract you while reading through code. It will, you were following maybe the algorithmic flow of it, but then you look at it and it goes, and then you're like, oh, there is a space missing there. So throwing this in his face in the review. But when code is drastically different, that also means that your visual pattern recognition mechanisms go away. Meaning that like things that you know are typical mistakes to make in, say, your homely, familiar style will sometimes not be as apparent in a different style to you, and only after changing to your style, you will basically you will figure out, oh yeah, this is terrible. This might be terrible code. It might not be, but it's something to keep in mind as we do this. So consistency is really the other topic here. Oh, perfect. So why, I mean, in the end, you are working with other people. You have more readers than you really have writers, and people review your code. They will pair with you on your code. So you want to have a consistent style within you two, unless obviously you want to have your code to have personality. Like, oh yeah, this code was written by Mike from the other department. I hate this guy. I can see his code from 3 miles away. That's cool. And oh yeah, this is the terrible code that was written by the intern that has left us. That guy. But in the end, we're working on one product, so there should, like, it shouldn't be like that. In the end, the team that works on it, or all the constituent parts to it, should really should agree on one style and deal with it. Perfect. This is someone is trying to derail my ranting here. And I think this really goes back to something that I think it was Pavel yesterday who said that existing code sets an example, and this is sort of the broken window theory. If code is terrible within a project, it will not get better by itself. People will just use that as an excuse to keep writing terrible code, and that's that. So sure, I mean, they wrote terrible code, I can write terrible code too. So I'm just going to keep with it. And as engineers, we're not just tasked with building software that works. We have to build software that gets maintained. And maintenance, a consistent code style is really one of the building blocks towards long-term maintenance, because the guy who has to take over shouldn't be also taking on your code style. They should just be able to continue with a consistent code style that is there. Let's maybe look somewhere else. Like before we talk about Python a little bit more. Let's look at other languages. And there's a wonderful quote from the Effective Go guide that says, formatting issues are the most contentious but the least consequential. People can adapt to different formatting styles, but it's better if they don't have to, and less time is devoted to the topic if everyone adheres to the same style. This goes on in saying, the problem is how to approach this utopia without a long, prescriptive style guide. And Go actually made a decision in going early after a formatting tool that is basically uncontended in its use. Like from the beginning on, they had Go format, which is part of the system, basically. And everyone knows that if you want code to be formatted, you run Go format and you're done. And so there's lots of good ideas in this. Let's look at something else. There's Rust format. Rust early on invested in developer tooling. And Rust format is a semantics-preserving code formatter. it's the defector standard. It's considered and it's basically considered as part, like while they write a code style guide. But this code style guide also thinks about things like, are things are actually implementable? Can we write something can we write a code style guide that actually can be enforced through tooling, not just through, yeah, someone has to go through this long checklist and figure this out. Let's maybe go back to Python. And going back to Python is really, we have PEP8. We have PEP8. PEP8 exists since 2001. PEP8 checking, the earliest commits for the PEP8 repository were in 2006. That's also been a while. And if you want to just look at, and this is just my really short list of tools that help you formatting these days that make sense to look at. I dislike linting, I'll be honest. If a linter can fix something, and if a linter gives me a mechanical thing that I should fix and they cannot fix it, I don't consider that something good for me. Unless it needs human touch, I don't want to get a notification for it. I just want it fixed. So, and this really brings me back to this, right? Like, don't tell me to fix it. You're the machine. Like, I have more important things to do. But so here's my problem with PEP8. PEP8 is like this. PEP8 is like a very broad street, and it allows for a very broad set of styles. It is very, yeah, it allows for a lot, and actually people use that. And what I would like is actually, because otherwise I have discussions, is this within PEP8 or not? I would like to have it like this, laser focus, one small thing. And people like to use that freedom to them. And I have actually scanned the GitHub public data set for PyCode style directives that people put in their repositories. And what you will actually see, and this is just the two that I was able to pull out before I fell asleep, actually, at that night, is that people use max line length in many different ways, but like at least sort of the consensus along all the different, along a couple of thousand of those PEP8 files, config files, is that people like 120 much more than they like the PEP8 standard of 79/80. And people tend to ignore a lot of linting things. And if E501 doesn't seem familiar to you, E501 is really long line. Just don't tell me about the long lines. I don't care. And this was about 1,200 repositories that use I don't care about long lines. So what we really see here is that there's a lot of different implementations of PEP8, basically. We have PEP8, but PEP8 is like, there are so many, there's almost like small tribes of different PEP8s around. Like there's PEP8A, PEP8B, PEP8C, and every repository gets to choose their own. It's lovely. That's what I call a good code style. And here comes sort of a detour from another past diary entry, which was actually supposed to be this talk, but then I don't know, I changed it into a bit more renting. So I wanted to fix some code someday, and there's tooling for lint formatting, there's fixing tooling, but there's no tooling to fix quotes. Like I actually inherited some code that I wrote some code. I think I wrote most of it, but then there's other people joined, other people left, and then we had quotes we had double quotes, single quotes, like in all combinations that you could think of, same files, different files, across the whole project. So there was no tooling really, or at least none that I could think that worked really well. And just string replace doesn't work because quotes in quotes, then you might have certain edge cases that you just want to take care of. So what this led me down to, learning about lib223, and if you don't know what lib223 is, this is just a short excursion into crucial tooling for the rest of the remainder of this talk. 223 is a Python code refactoring tool. It has language grammar that actually spans from 2.7 to the current version of Python that it is shipped with. supposedly. And 223 comes with not just comes with a grammar, but it also comes with with so-called fixers. And what these do is they actually change your code for the better. Like a case for going from 2 to 3 is obviously changing print, because that's one of the most obvious examples of why you want to fix up code to go to 3. But then white spaces around comma is actually one of the other fixes, and there's a very long list of fixes around. So please check those out if you have time. That just sets up correct white spacing around commas, which is actually pretty neat. So why am I telling you this? Actually, first question: who's used 223? Not all that many people. Did you like it? No, I don't see any hands for that. But why am I telling you this? When I was looking at that, I wanted to write a quote fixer for 223. Problem with that is, this is a matrix of files that have language features of that version in it. Code that uses language features that was introduced in specific versions, and then what 223 can actually parse. And if you look at that, and that was roughly a year ago, there were like both released versions at the time didn't correctly parse. So that was the end of that. Like I was sad, really sad. But, and this is why this talk I had to change my talk. Actually, what happened is I had prepared, I started writing patches and sort of preparing a patch. Then someone else patched it before I could submit it. So what's neat about this is with 3.353 and the upcoming 3.6.2 release, we will actually, the grammar will actually be very, very complete. Like, it's not fully complete yet. There are issues. This is a simplified test, but it's been good enough in my testing. So really, why is this cool? Python lib223 gives you an AST, and it gives you, and now you might ask, well, doesn't Python the interpreter itself has an AST? Yes, the Python interpreter has an AST, but it throws away all your comments, because it doesn't need them for execution. So it makes sense for it to throw those away. So how do you feel? So I personally have another strong opinion on comments, where I dislike them mostly. But that's a whole other topic that I don't even want to get into right now. But people like to retain their comments, and I'd like my formatter not to throw away comments, because people probably are going to hate me for that, even though I would like that sometimes. I'd rather be hated and do some good for the world. And so with this roadblock, so what this gives us now is an AST that we can manipulate that has comments, retains comments, so we can start replacing things. We can update. We actually have official tooling that is meant for manipulating Python code. That is actually actively maintained, doesn't lag behind too much. It still lags behind a little bit behind the interpreter, but it's getting there. And it's actually a great place to start contributing. So look at that. It's pretty readable from my perspective. So with this roadblock out of the way, it's hunting season, friends. It's really hunting seasons. Use 223. Like use the AST that's inside it, because it gives you abilities to programmatically change your code and adapt, and finally implement all those fixes that you wanted to implement, or have like something like a really robust formatting tool. This I probably just talked about mostly, so let's not. And just as an example of that, I actually got to write my quote fixer, which turned out to be roughly this, and this basically just reduces every quote in the code base that is being scanned to single quotes, and it works great, and it made my life so much easier, because now no one could point to, oh, but we're having this mixed thing here, so it doesn't matter that I'm mixing things. What that looks like in the end is it does things like this. And this is just as an example, sort of the fixes that it does here. And it will really go through. It will actually retain doc strings, because those are by by PEP8 definition. Triple quotes, so we'll stick with those. But like for everything else, it will correctly do the thing. So what other tools are there? Like there is actually one other tool that I'd like to mention as part of this talk that is called YAP, and that's yet another Python formatter. And its express goal is to end all holy wars about formatting, which is really in line with my feelings. So YAP fixes all formatting by looking at the AST and not to get too technical here, you can read the code while we're not sitting here. We can do a reading circle afterwards if you like. It fixes the formatting by looking at the AST and then trying to place all the elements based on a penalty system. If you know GNU's line spacing algorithms, something like that. Clang format does something similar. So if you want to look at that, it's actually pretty neat. It's actually pretty neat. It's not perfect yet. It will mess up your code in ways that you're not expecting, but you can contribute, so it's fine. And actually that was the first thing I did when I started looking at that project. I started adding patches to it because I want my code clean at some point, really. So what this does is, and this is just an example, it will really rigidly go through all your code. Even if your code may adhere to PEP8, it has an opinion about what this code should look like, and it will turn your code into that. And that's something that I find really nice, because if you've done this once and keep on doing it afterwards, you will not have many issues. I hear you. This is another standard. No, I get it. And I have some other entries from my code cleaning diary that I also wanted to talk about, but that I have thrown out of this presentation for reasons that I just want to rant about them real quick. Is that I just want, and that we can talk about day and night. I'm happy to talk about all of these, but really think when you're looking at all these kinds of linting and fixing mechanisms, think about that machine time is cheap compared to human time. But don't forget that if a human has to sit in front of it waiting for it, then it's not machine time anymore. Choose your tools, and by choosing your tools, I don't mean just choose them and just stick them in and just let them run, but actually review, tweak them. Actually, sometimes it's the combination of tools. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 runs of something to actually fix it up because the tooling is not terrible. Like, contribute back to those tools if you find errors, if you fix them. Don't lint when you can fix, really. There's so much to this. Simplify usage. As much as I like all kinds of complicated management commands that have shit tons of parameters, give people a script, make it easy. Don't write style guides when you can automate all of that, and keep your checklist short so you can remember them actually. And get your team buy-in first, because I've done this a couple times, and I have done this with and without express permission. People were not happy. I wasn't happy, and sometimes it takes a very long time to reconciliate after this. And here's the go wild part. Where's this going? Like why? If we have all this cool tooling, where could this go? So let's think about a YAP too. Like, let's talk about a de facto standard. Remove settings. Who needs 5 style guides when there could be 1? Python 4, like, let it come with an automated formatter that implements one notion of PEP8. Why not? Like, make that an express feature of it. Other languages are doing it. This is not the most terrible idea, apparently. Have a Python AST SCM. Store code as an AST, strip, and just use text as representation. Really, just blow away white space. This is the final frontier, friends. You really want to go there? Maybe. Like, but it doesn't hurt to try, right? So people like to end on question slides. I have questions for you. So I'm actually tired of insignificant white space discussions. Are you already? And I'm willing to actually get over my code style preferences. I have multiple times in my career already, so I'm happy to overcome them once more if you are willing to come with me. I would like to ask you if you can we have style enforcement without settings? Can we just make it simple and quick? And is there a way for us to just align on one style and be there? Just be, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't this would lift, and in the case of some repositories, this would lift about 20% of their pull request comments away. That would be nice. And am I alone in wanting this getting fixed? Thank you.
Thank you for a really nice talk with emotions. That was good. Right now, I don't know if anyone wants to answer these questions that Sebastian gave us, because I think that it is really important to ask ourselves. Yeah, we have Carl with a question for you. So, you have answer?
Well,
okay.
So, one of the questions is about the one Python style. I'm just wondering why there needs to be one Python style. Like, why can it be like liberal, like you said, like to make an AST and everybody has its own style, right?
That is the existential question, really, right? Like, if you want to go let's store the AST, everyone can have their own. That would be fine with me, but that would mean so much. Like, that would mean so much yak shaving around this problem. Like, we have to talk about how diffs are presented, how tools are working with those repositories. This is a really huge topic. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go after that. Like, I actually think there might be some great things in this. Also, refactorings become manipulations of the tree, maybe repeatable refactorings of that tree, so that you can even merge those refactorings into other code as you go. There's some really nice implications of having an AST in your source code management instead of just plain text, because the system doesn't have to worry about white space anymore. Feel free. Let's talk about it. Like, I'm happy to go there and maybe fail doing it. Like, that might also be fun. Like, sometimes we learn something just from failing doing it.
And are you aware of any efforts on GitHub to do this?
I have not seen anything that really tries to do this. I think there were some efforts in other languages that haven't, at least none that have panned out, so that I've seen, but also most of them were not really used by many people. So there's some bias there.
Okay. By the way, can you put back the XKCD slide? I didn't catch it.
Oh, the XKCD slide was the slide about standards, and that there's going to be just another one. The moment we make up a new standard, basically, like, we think we built the standard that will rule them all, but we basically just make up the next number 15 out of the 14 that already existed, right? And this is what this could just be if not adopted by a lot of people, and hence why couldn't Python 4 come with something very prescriptive as opposed to something very liberal that would, at least from my perspective, help. I'm not saying that everyone needs to agree with that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the questions. Does anyone else have anything to ask? Or will you leave it afterwards?
Or if you have strong disagreement, I'd also love to hear that. Like, I'm always happy to be pushed over in my opinions. Like, that's fine too.
Okay.
I'm not anyone else.
Okay, that's not a problem.
So, have you seen any efforts on using machine learning for reformatting to look into the commands and source code that can figure out that?
There's actually two projects that come off my head right away. I'm not sure the one is not using machine learning, but there's one sort of Python checking tool. They say they use machine learning, but they don't explain it very well. But they basically they say they're not using any of the standard checkers. Like, I have to look up the name for you if you want me to. There's also Descartes AI, which is a source code helper that is based around machine learning, that tries to show you issues around your code based on learning what you have done previously in your code base and things that you have commented on. Descartes AI is the name of that, but not as. And then there was I mean. Not necessarily exactly for fixing, but there was this project that would allow you to upload all your code and they would suggest usage for like a start of a method that you started, they would suggest how you could continue on using these variables. But beyond that, I haven't seen much, no.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so with this question and answer, I will thank you once again, and for now, for a really good speech. It was really interesting. I hope that not only for me, for a beginner. So thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you.